What happened to the old timber slide? Can anything still be found after 100 years of abandonment? Does anyone remember? Does anyone care? Progress marches forward, a train with no reverse. In its wake are the vestiges of those left behind, those that no longer fit, those without purpose, discarded, forgotten. But can we look back and find them? Can we remember? Can we find the old timber slide? Before the days of roads and rail lines, waterfalls posed a difficult issue to lumbermen floating their winter's harvest down the Ottawa River. The rafts would need to be disassembled and the timbers floated over the falls, always at the risk of damage. The invention of the timber slide by Rugel's Wright greatly assisted this process, allowing the individual cribs of the raft to slide down the falls. At first, it was private individuals that built, operated, and maintained the slides. Later on, the government assumed this responsibility. Every waterfall on the Ottawa River eventually had one or more timber slides. In 1835, Andrew and George Buchanan, brothers of Scottish descent, built a slide on the Shaw Falls, across from the growing community of Fitzroy Harbour. Fitzroy Harbour has been hiding a secret for over 100 years, an abandoned timber slide. Old maps are a time machine in some regards. They let us look to the past to see what has come before us. While studying the Fitzroy Township map one day, I noticed something. An inscription reading Government Slide. But that was it. No location of the structure could be found on the map. Looking at modern satellite images, I tried to line up the old map in an attempt to pinpoint any possible remains. But nothing stood out. The search went cold. Before the construction of the power dam, Shaw Falls was once a mighty string of 11 individual falls called chutes. Each chute had a name. Names such as Ragged, Horseshoe, Moors, Wolverine, Rifle, and Black Chutes. The old map placed the location of the timber slide near Victoria Island, the largest in the string of islands sprinkled across the falls. What remains of Victoria Island since the construction of the dam can be accessed by the current portage route around the falls just off Clifford Campbell Drive. This is where our journey begins. Let's go find a timber slide. So just on the other side of this small river is what used to be Victoria Island. Before the construction of the power dam, the other end here was very fast flowing rapids. Now once we get over there, you'll see it's just a little trickle. Heading across Victoria Island now. We're heading in a north direction and we're gonna head over to the Ottawa River into Fitzroy Harbour itself. Finding long forgotten abandoned places feels much like a treasure hunt. You need to dig up clues, research old documents, interpret photos, read first-hand eyewitness accounts, and then after all that work, hopefully find that big X that marks the spot on your location. We're getting close to tracking down the location of the timber slide. Deadheads in the water are a sure sign of past logging.
Spotted something quite interesting over here. Alright, we came across a quite large round eye hook that's just embedded in the rock with this absolutely massive anchor. There's another one just right up there too. Here it is, everybody. We found what remains of the old timber slide.
And just like that, after years of wondering, the Shaw Falls timber slide has finally been found. The moment feels odd, not exactly what I had expected. The excitement quickly dulls. What remains is what I suspected. Very little. The untrained eye would easily pass on by, not knowing they were in the presence of such an important structure in the history of the Ottawa Valley.
Really isn't much left of this old timber slide. Some piles of stone. Let's go explore, see what else there is. There's a collection of rods hammered into the rock right down here at the entrance. Or I guess the exit of the slide. There's a bunch over here. Some further up the hill. It's a bit difficult to make out here, but you can still see one of the timbers at the bottom of the stone pile here. So that would have been the crib, the bottom of the crib making up the wall to the timber slide.
The timber slide was built by Andrew and George Buchanan in 1835, constructed alongside the rifle chute during the square timber era. The brothers were no stranger to the logging industry. They had already built a slide at the Shoddy Air Falls and a sawmill in Arnprior on the Madawaska River. In 1845, the government of the day invested heavily in the logging industry by acquiring existing slides, including Shaw Falls. They implemented improvements, built more slides, installed log booms, straightened some river section, and dredged shallow sections. The square timber industry hit its zenith in the 1880s. Coming up behind it was the sawlog and pulp era. Without the need to assemble the round logs into rafts, and less concern about damaging the logs destined for the sawmills, sawlogs and pulp logs were allowed to plunge over the falls. Rail lines were also winding their way into the valley, offering a more convenient method of transporting the yearly cut. The combination of these factors and a declining market for square timber inevitably sealed the fate of the timber slide. In 1908, the last raft made its voyage down the Shaw Falls timber slide. It was a crib from none other than the greatest lumber king the valley ever produced, the one and only J.R. Booth. I wonder if they knew this would be the last crib. Was there a celebration to mark the end? I suspect they didn't know until long after the moment had passed.
I'm standing at what I believe is the main entrance to the timber slide. Now, the reason I think this is there's these three lines here in the rocks. I believe this is the main gate that they would open up to let the timber rafts come down the slide. Up to the left of this area, it's quite flat, and then the timber slide starts to slope down the hill over to the Ottawa River on the right side. So these three lines here lead me to believe that that would have been the gates. Okay, as we head further north, you can see the rock wall. This would be on the west side. Up over on the other side, there's another rock wall. You can clearly see it up here. We have to make it through a lot of thick brush here. It's really grown up. Along the way, you come across a lot of these spikes in the ground. They're quite common. Been finding a lot of these. You can see the wall start to descend down the hill. The wall on the west side is completely gone. Ends right about here. So you can see there's a nice rock wall up to this point, but then as soon as we start to descend, it's just been completely washed out. There's just nothing here anymore. On the other side, there's still a nice defined wall going down. You can kind of see it through the trees. Now, as you've seen in old photographs, this whole area would have had timbers laying across and then a whole bunch of nice flat planks sloped down so that the rafts could slide easily. Nothing remains of the old wood. It's completely gone. The last time this was ever used was in 1908, so it's been sitting for a long time. And everything's just completely rotten. There's nothing left. Other than that one timber I found on the east wall at the base and a bunch of spikes, there's really nothing left of this old timber slide. I'm descending down the timber slide now, and you just keep coming across these large spikes that are hammered into the rock, and these things are quite large. You know, just size comparison. These are large spikes that are pounded into the rock. Alright, so continuing down, we can still see a clearly defined wall on the east side. And as we make our way down to the harbor, you can still see this wall carry on pretty much all the way to the water. We're at the bottom of the timber slide now. This is the west wall as it enters into Fitzroy Harbour. We have the east wall, and then in the middle here we have a very large pile of stones. Now this should be quite flat across here where the timbers would have laid, and then you would have had those nice flat planks so that the rafts could slide down. So I suspect over time the west wall has washed into this pile here in the center. Timber slide exits here into Fitzroy Harbour, which is part of the Ottawa River. The apron of the timber slide would have been right here so that the rafts of timber would have a nice gentle entry into the water. Now we need to do a little bit more exploring, because in old photographs just up over this ridge we should find the house of the old slide master. Well, true to the photographs, there it is. Or what's left of it anyway. We can see the stone foundation of the old slide master's house.
In 1889, it would cost $1 to run a square crib down the slide. It was the job of the slide master to collect these tolls. Much like the locks on the Rideau Canal, the slide master and his family lived in a house near the foot of the slide. Over the years, this position was held by George and Andrew Buchanan, James Steve, David McFarlane, and finally W.A. Sheriff.
Just right over here would have been what appears to be the entrance to the crawl space under the house. We have this little section of wall that comes down into the crawl space area. This is still, again, really well preserved. Alright, so I'm standing up on the corner here, and we can follow the foundation line roughly still. There's still enough of it there that you can make out. Comes back over here, over to the entrance to the cellar, follows along that line, and then up over near the harbor. You can still faintly see the foundations.
The government officially abandoned the timber slide in October of 1918. The slide master house was either torn down or collapsed. history holds this secret. Time and progress seem to leave little untouched. Victoria Island was expropriated by the government in 1912. The public was hungry for electricity, and Shaw Falls had massive potential. While scouting the island in 1929 in preparation for the construction of the dam, a reporter from the Arnprior Chronicle noted that the slide was in fairly good state of preservation. If only we valued structures from the past. As the power dam was built, the water flowing to the slide was slowly cut off. In 1932, the gates to the generators were open and a modern age had begun. In the same way time consumed the timber slide, so too was the unfortunate fate of the Buchanan brothers. Sometime shortly after 1834, Andrew fell ill and died. George continued with the timber slide and Arnprior Mill, but in 1836, after endless legal battles with Chief McNabb and an untimely collapse in the lumber industry, he lost it all. After retreating to Morris Island, George tragically met his fate in 1841 when he was struck by an oar of a timber crib descending the very slide he had built. The slide would outlive its creators, but in the end time spares no one. Nothing other than a pile of rocks and some iron spikes remain today. My presence has momentarily awakened this old creation, a curious visitor that has come to learn. Perhaps it's still waiting for someone to erect a historic plaque, a fitting tribute to such an important structure. For now, though, it will need to continue its wait as I leave it to return to its long slumber, warned that someone has found her, someone cares. The Shaw Falls timber slide has been found.